Party on, Todd.
Party on, Sal.
Rock on.
Rock on.
Well, welcome back, POJCasters, to another episode of the Party on John Cast, a podcast of music, theology, whatever is on our mind, coffee, and other things. I'm Reverend Sal Samarco, a validated minister. I realized last episode I said I'm a validated ministry. I'm a validated minister in the Presbytery of Newton, the Peace USA, and the validated ministry of chaplaincy.
There's a whole lot of validation there, isn't there?
I need validation all the time.
Well, I am the Rockin' Reverend Todd Laddick, an ordained elder in the United Methodist Church of Greater New Jersey. I serve a congregation in Newton, New Jersey, on higher ground from Sal.
Rock on.
Rock on, man.
And we actually have a guest with us. We're on location this episode, and we have a very special guest with us, someone I've known for many years. Well, I'll let Bill tell how we met.
Well, thank you, Sal. Hi, my name is Bill Vila. I am not an ordained clergy. I am an ordained bus driver.
Yes.
But I'm also a musician, actor, playwright, and stage manager. I've worked in theater. I've worked as a church musician, so that's also how I know of Sal. And I'm also, like I indicated, a bus driver, but not just a bus driver. I am a long-distance bus driver, which means I do not every 2-3 blocks and stop. I do every 225 miles and then I stop. And I've been doing that for about 23 years. And Todd, we just met, so it's a pleasure meeting you, sir.
Pleasure meeting you, too.
May God bless you and keep you.
I just committed a great sin. I apologize.
Don't worry, I didn't see it. Did you see anything, Sam?
I didn't see anything.
Exactly, that's what I thought. And I've been looking forward to this podcast for quite some time. So thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, it's been great. It's great to have you.
Good to have you.
And I've been looking forward to it, too. So it is exciting to be here. And where is here right now, actually?
So we are at, is it Hoboken Cigars?
Yes, we are in Hoboken Cigars in the hamlet of Hoboken, New Jersey. A small little town on the other side of the Hudson River, directly across from Manhattan. So we like to, or at least I like to, refer to Hoboken sometimes as the 6th borough of New York City. And that might be offensive to some New Jerseyans, but I'm a New Yorker born and bred, so A, I don't care what you think. And B, more importantly, since Hoboken, New Jersey has a subway that connects from here to Manhattan in less than 15 minutes, my ideology is that if a city has a subway that close to New York City, it's part of New York City. So therefore, Hoboken is the unofficial 6th borough of New York City.
Who am I to argue? My favorite team is called the New York Giants, and it's nowhere near New York City. I mean, it is, but it isn't.
That's another story entirely.
Yeah. So we are in Hoboken. Hoboken is also a popular spot for many northern New Jersey young adults to come and to imbibe because it's cheaper than New York City.
And it's trendy.
Given the fact that we are seeing lots of St. Patrick's Day revelers outside.
True.
Getting drunk.
Including myself, because I am aware that today, oh, by the way, as this is being broadcast or recorded, today is the first full Saturday in the month of March, and that means in Hoboken today is St. Patrick's Day.
That's right.
Or as a person of a certain age like me would call it, amateur hour.
Amateur hour.
But because I have a certain investment in sporting my greenery, and also because my husband is also Irish, I'm of the opinion that I'm going to celebrate Irish culture just by sporting my green. So I have my green tie, I have my lucky pin, I even have my scarf of Ireland. There it goes. And I think I have the logo. There it is.
There
so
it
rock
is.
on.
Yeah.
It also provides a certain amount of security in that when the young folks start looking at me and they see all the green, they go, "Hey, rock on!" I'm like, "Okay, fine, good for you. Have a good time. Don't drink too much. And don't act like a." Well, I'm not going to say that. But you knew what I was thinking.
I knew
right?
exactly.
Sal, I know you thought I was thinking. But I love the color green anyway, so it's nice to wear when it's appropriate and when it just seems fitting. And today seems fitting.
Yeah.
Very fitting. And darn it, I didn't.
You didn't get the memo, Todd.
I didn't get the memo. I missed a lot of memos this morning.
Yes, evidently.
But, you know.
I forgot to also say, I'm wearing my Be Kind Mr. Rogers t-shirt.
Oh,
Very cool.
that's nice. But y'all need Jesus.
We do.
I wish I had known you were going to do that. I would have worn my... Well, I actually do have a pin of Pittsburgh, but I have a pin of Mr. Rogers as well. And the trolley.
Nice.
I didn't wear that today.
And for those who are listening to this, I said y'all need Jesus because that's what my T-shirt says. Y'all need Jesus. So that's where we are in this neighborhood.
That's where we are. Which brings us to...
Oh, this brings us to our Brews segment.
Hey guys,
Hey, Sal.
how do you know that Jesus likes coffee?
How?
He wrote about it in the book of Hebrews. Every time.
I'm new to this, folks.
That is about as old as my most excellent music scream is loud.
Yes. So that brings us to what we're drinking. I'm drinking a Starbucks Nitro cold brew with sweet cream. Going a little different today. What are you drinking, Tom?
I am drinking a once was hot Grande Pikes Place roast black coffee. Because I figured, well, I always drink black coffee, but I figured instead of getting a latte, we're smoking cigars. I gotta go bold.
Mm-hmm.
When Bill here asked me what kind of cigar I wanted, I said strong and spicy. Surprise me.
And I think you'll find that he will be surprised. Now, unlike Todd, Sal likes his cigars mellow.
Yes.
And I don't
I'm a mellow guy. What can I
And
say?
I don't personally drink coffee because I'm a morning person by design, so anything else to turbocharge me might be a mistake. Because I might irritate more than a couple of people in the morning that way. But so purposes of today, I'm just drinking water, but I do have my cigar. And I tend to smoke them strong, full-bodied, and Maduro because that's what kind of balances me out. But for Todd's purpose, we are both smoking the same cigar. We're smoking LFD, La Flor Dominicana, double ligero. It is a full-body Maduro cigar. Both are on the 50 gauge, which is a kind of a wide cigar, not overtly huge, but strong, full cigar. And this place, Hoboken Cigars, has a myriad of all types of cigars of different lengths, sizes, gauges, and strengths. And it is safe to say that you don't smoke a cigar like this unless you have food in your system. It's kind of like going out to a bar and not having eaten anything and then start tossing them back, and then you start finding out how your body hates you and will let you know in ways you're not prepared to deal with how it does not.
Yeah, true.
Cigars work similarly.
So Bill just let us into our smoke on the water segment.
Yes, our
So,
smoke on the water segment. Why on the water?
Well, we are on River Street.
We are on River
right
Street.
by the Hudson River in Hoboken. And I am smoking, Bill picked out all our cigars, so I'm smoking a Blind Man's Bluff. Maybe Bill can tell more about it.
Sal indicated to me that he prefers his cigars mellow. And he's been to this establishment many times. We've had our own talks because I've known this guy for quite a long time. And when he revealed to me that he enjoys cigars, the attitude I took is, you're going to drive all the way down from where you come from to come smoke with me. I'm buying you cigars. End of story. So when he suggested a mellow cigar, I reached out to the proprietors of this place and asked them and they're experts in their cigars choosing. They pick out cigars like you pick out your clothes. They know what they will pick out for you based on what you ask them what you want. So I wanted something nice and mellow. A Blind Man's Bluff cigar is a nice mellow cigar, but there is a catch. You still have to eat before you try to smoke it. Otherwise, it will smack you around. Whereas the ones that Todd and I are smoking, well, it's Maduro. By design, you kind of have to eat something, because I don't care how of a disposition you possess, it's going to hurt you.
It's going to smack you around no matter what.
Exactly.
Yeah. Just prepared to get your ass handed to you.
That's right.
Yeah. Oh, we can say ass? Cool.
Oh, we can say
You can say whatever you want.
Oh,
on this podcast.
good,
Yeah,
good.
worst comes to worst, we bleep.
Good. The
for
filters have come
comedic
off
effect.
then, ladies and gentlemen. So hold on to your hat. It's going to be a hell of a ride.
All right, so that's what we're smoking. Well, why don't we actually go ahead and light our cigars?
I think we should light our cigars.
And I'm going to help you with doing that by
Okay.
I'm going to put this down, and I'm going to walk over to their lighter.
And while they do this, I'm going to do this. Okay.
I'm going to light my own myself.
I don't know if you can still hear me or not. Todd, thank you very much. This device over here, believe it or not, is a lighter. But it goes back to 1940. These lighters go back to 1940. Yes, yes. So, unlike most lighters where you can just click and light, you have to pull this arm back and lights the filament. And then at that point, you can light up. So, lighters up. Should I get yours or you want to do it on your own?
Well, see, I've used my trusty old Zippo.
And how about you, Todd?
I'll do this.
Okay, fine. I'll bring the mic over to you so that you can hear it. And do you have enough cable to move around?
I do.
Okay, super. There you go. Fantastic. It's one of those cigars that you have to give it a little bit of time to, but once it starts to kick, like a diesel engine. It won't turn on right away. And yes, I do see your point about how being close to your beard might be a concern.
Could be a concern.
Yeah, it almost could have been a moment ago, but that was fun. Let me just give it a bit more time. I find the slower you do it,
This is the kind of like...
the slower you do it, the slower you draw, the more full body comes to the cigar. There you go.
There we go.
You did it right.
Hopefully this is translating to the podcast.
Yes, this is my kind of cigar. You chose well. Not
Bill-
that I didn't think you would.
Bill has good taste in cigars.
I have to find, because some cigar smoking, like drinking, like certain amount of imbuing, it's something that you have to be connected with. And if you're not, for anyone just to pick for you and they don't know what they're talking about, and I don't claim for a moment that I know what I'm talking about for other people. I know for myself.
That's right. That's right.
So
That's always the case. And then
That's right. So as we enjoy our cigars, let's move on to
our most excellent music segment.
pretty shocking every time.
Wow.
Yeah, Bill's face said it
I
all.
just turned all different colors.
So this is where we talk about whatever music we're listening to. It started out as the most excellent metal music.
Right.
It's now just most excellent music. I'll go first. I've been listening to an album by Van Halen, Van Halen 3, which is an album where they had Gary Cherone from Extreme join, and it was universally panned by the critics because Gary Cherone really wasn't a good fit for Van Halen. Musically, the album musically, Van Halen wise, is great. It's Van Halen. It's the technicality, the virtuosity. It's all there, but just Gary Cherone was not a good fit for that album. So I was listening to. They have a song on it called "Once." I gotta find the lyrics. All right. Here we go. So it's a different sound for Van Halen than that most people are used to. Even after, it's not a David Lee Roth sound. It's not a Sammy Hagar sound. It was definitely a different sound for them, a deeper, more reflective sound. But it was good. So this song is called Once. Once embraced, can't ever be let go. Once revealed, can't ever not shown. Once believed, can't ever lose faith. Once shared, can't ever be separated. Once born, can ever not be conceived. Once present, can ever be past. Once first, once can ever, never, not ever last. Returning home of the prodigal, holding the intangible. To believe in a miracle, believe it. Can you believe it? Have you ever been touched? Once. Really touched? Could it ever be too much? Can you tell me? So, the assurance only hope can bring, with a conviction of the unseen. See, it's greater than everything. See, oh, can you see it? Once. So, it's kind of a spiritual song without being spiritual.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably why critics panned it. But I liked it.
Well, you know how those critics are.
Yeah.
They know everything.
Yeah, they do. So that's my most excellent selection. How about you? Who wants to go next?
Me? Okay. So I have been on such an Evanescence kick. There's something about Metal and Amy Lee that just is awesome. And this song Tourniquet off of their first album, Fallen. First off, the entire album of Fallen is just phenomenal. I was telling Sal on the ride down here, I don't think there's a single filler song on that entire album. It's just like all like just awesomeness of Evanescence. But for me, like I really love this song Tourniquet because, as I've shared before, and Sal and I both have been open about this, like I have suffered my whole life with depression and anxiety. And so when I read these lyrics, this is kind of, I see myself in them to a degree, and I think this has been my relationship with God in a lot of ways. And I would say that this is really, to me, a 21st century psalm. Like this is, if the psalmist could have thought ahead to what Evanescence sounded like, they would have written this. So the lyrics are, I tried to kill the pain, but only brought more, so much more. I lay dying, and I'm pouring crimson regret and betrayal. I'm dying, praying, bleeding, screaming. Am I too lost to be saved? Am I too lost? My God, my tourniquet, return to me salvation. My God, my tourniquet, return to me salvation. Do you remember me, lost for so long? Will you be on the other side? Will you forget me? I'm dying, praying, bleeding, screaming. Am I too lost to be saved? Am I too lost? My God, my tourniquet, return to me salvation. My God, my tourniquet, return to me salvation. My wounds cry for the grave. My soul cries for deliverance. Will I be denied? Christ, tourniquet, my suicide. And I think about that song because the idea of a tourniquet obviously is to stop the bleeding, to stop the blood flow, to preserve life in essence, if you're using it for that reason. And so seeing Christ as a tourniquet, as a lifesaver in some ways, as the hope for deliverance, as the one you cry out to for the return of your salvation. Just the powerful lyrics, and Amy Lee herself is a Christian, but the band isn't necessarily a Christian band. But there's no doubt that her faith and her faith came through in these lyrics. I mean, it's just a very, very powerful song. So that's my offering.
Okay, I think I would have been kind of lost for words, but Sal knows me. And now I understand more on how this particular segment works. Allow me to offer, if you would not mind, one but two, and it'll be
Sure.
very quick.
Sure.
Since it's obvious from the both of you that the music that you pick works in cahoots with your individual ministries and how you have to, as a person in clergy, need to have your own souls nourished in order to be able to nourish those who depend upon you, which will this probably lead into our discussion. My upbringing in church has a lot to do with the music mainly and not as much the words. But because of how I function in life, I receive my inspiration from whatever would hit me if throughout my life or in the moment. So to that end, as a church musician, I found myself playing my music in a jazz style motif. It's part because I'm a musician first, everything else happened later. Part of my studying in music turned me on to jazz because, well, my education includes being a student of the High School of Music and Art in New York City. And when that happened, I was exposed to jazz appreciation. A big up to Justin DeChocho, the teacher who I had back in those days. And he introduced me to jazz as an idiom, as an art form, and as a culture. So when I started going to college, the first song that really hit me hard in the idiom of jazz came from a pianist by the name of McCoy Tyner. And I mentioned that because he just recently passed away. But he came out with an album called Double Trios. And in that album, there was a song called Latino Suite. Now, if you hear me say the word Latino, why does it sound Spanish? It's because I am. My background's from Puerto Rico. So to hear an African-American male playing the piano of a song that starts as Latino, I want to hear how it sounds. And there's no lyrics to that, but the music is enchanting to me. And as a pianist, I naturally am gravitated to how other pianists who have demonstrated their proficiency and fluidity in their instrument. And bottom line, the dude kicked ass. So that being said, that's the musical component that I can bring to the table. But as far as lyrics is concerned, also know I am a child of the 80s and 90s.
Hell yeah.
So my music, my music that I embraced was a lot of rap, hip-hop, house music especially. And, well, there was this group, and they're no longer around. And if I'm wrong, someone correct me. But there was this group back in the 90s that I used to listen to from a lady. Her name was Lisa Velez. You may not know her real name, but you may know her from her other name, Lisa. And her crew was called The Cult Jam.
The Cult Jam. Yeah.
And they had a song in the 90s that pretty much encapsulates how I conduct myself in life. And I'll read you those lyrics because they do exist. And actually, the song is called "Let the Beat Hit Them." Also, so the lyrics go a little something like, I'm trying to do this without having to stop. Okay, I'm gonna have to stop. Okay, the lyrics go something like this: in order to play with this record, you must tune your bass to up. Let the beat hit them. Let the music take control. The beat goes round and round and up and down, and let the beat hit them. Got to learn to let go.
Amen.
And that's pretty much how I conduct my life.
Amen.
Amen.
Wow. So that was our most excellent music segment.
That was a most excellent music segment.
It was.
Excellent.
Excellent. Party on.
Need we remind our listeners that we specifically named this podcast off of two of our most excellent inspirations. 3, really. Well, 4 maybe if you count Garth. So Wayne, Garth, Bill, and Ted. Woo!
Excellent.
I'll smoke to that.
Amen to that, brother.
So that's our most excellent music selection. So let's move on to our actual main topic for the recording, which is, without setting ourselves on fire, which is Sabbath.
Sabbath? Bloody Sabbath. Hell
So
yeah.
the last time Bill and I were together here at the cigar shop, we kind of had a conversation, and I said that would be an awesome subject for our podcast, which is the idea of Sabbath, but more specifically Sabbath for those who are clergy or folks who are called to vocations or ministries that preclude them from actually going to what everyone associates as Sunday Sabbath or worship. So how do we rest? How do we worship? How do we find Sabbath when the three of us can't necessarily take Sabbath on Sunday?
Yeah. And for those of you who may be Seventh-day Adventists out there, for those of you who can't worship on Saturday.
Right.
Yeah. Either way. So my household is one of those households. Unlike some clergy, there are many clergy I know who are clergy couples, where both clergy, in the couple, both people in the household are clergies and serve in different churches. Sometimes, rarely, they'll serve in the same church, but most of the time they're serving in separate churches. In my household, we're not. Bernadette and I are not a clergy couple, but Bernadette is a nurse, and nurses have to work usually every other weekend, so Bernadette typically works, I think, every Sunday. But that allows her typically to go to church. But in the past, when she was working at the hospital, there were some Sundays she couldn't go. And I had to, anytime I went to a church to be appointed, one of the things I had to say is, my wife is a nurse, and she will not always be in church, and that's just that. And the churches I've gone to have accepted that. I mean, they respect the fact that she's a nurse. But it makes it hard because there are times when my wife would like to be at church for something, but can't be because she has to work, and with our schedules being so all over the place, there's very little time for us to sit down and actually observe Sabbath. And for me, my wife is one thing, because when she does go to church, she gets fed. I mean, that's her thing. I mean, she has to be on somewhat because she's in the church that I'm serving on, and she's the clergy spouse. But for me, I'm always serving. And so I rarely get to actually sit and worship, which is a really weird thing. So when those opportunities do arise, I really enjoy them. And so yeah, it's really difficult to find Sabbath. So what does Sabbath look like for you, Sal? Because you're a chaplain. I haven't even talked about what Sabbath looks like for me, but we'll start with you.
Well, it's and I'm a little different in that from Todd, in that my ministry doesn't necessarily mean I have to be in church on Sunday. But often, because of the nature of chaplaincy, and as a solo chaplain, you're on call 24/7. There have been Sundays where I've been pulpit supply, or gotten a call in the middle of church, and I have to respond. So the advantage that I have over Todd is that, number one, Allison is not expected to be a clergy spouse because we're not in a church. Like, I'm not leading a church. Now, there are folks within our congregation where we worship where they know that I'm clergy, and I've done a pretty good job at, other than the one time I preached at the church we attend, where when I'm there in the pew, I'm there as a person in the pew. And Allison is there as a person in the pew. So my ministry doesn't get in the way of that unless I'm called off to something. So I want to say that
Don't worry about it.
half of my Sundays are spent with Allison in worship, but often I'm working 7 days a week, 6 days a week, and I have to find times to just relax.
Yeah, and just so those of you who are hearing background noise and all that, that's because we're as you know, we like to be in a live place with live ambience, and so to our friends, if any noise comes across, it's okay. It'll pick us up more than it'll pick you up.
In fact, we encourage it, quite frankly, because we're not trying to make this into a a
studio.
sanitized
Yeah.
studio environment. This is real life.
Yeah. So let me tell you, this is one of the chillest places we've had the opportunity to sit and record. The last place we did was a bar, and that wasn't as chill until the second Manhattan hit. Then it chilled right out. So, so how about what's that look like for you, Bill? Because you are a bus driver, and as you said, you're not just driving buses from here to New York City and back. You're driving hundreds of miles.
I go all over. Yeah, and I did not realize this before we met, that your wife's a nurse.
Yeah.
My mother was a nurse.
Okay.
And Sal, with your permission, I may gravitate towards how we reconnected.
Yeah.
We can go into our background and how we met and reconnect and all that stuff. We can share.
And I'll do what amounts to be a Reader's Digest version, because it's a long thing. But my point is this: to answer your question to begin with, because my work as a driver does not preclude the possibility of having set days of the week for me to be off. And even if they did, they may not necessarily be on the Sabbath, where I could freely go to worship at a church. So this goes back to what I mentioned in the beginning about my relationship with music. Whether the lyrics exist or not in the song is irrelevant to how the relationship of music happens to me. To put it mildly, I can have church wherever I want. Now, I'll say it like this. I was raised in the church. I played for a church in Spanish Harlem where I grew up. I cut my bones and teeth as a musician playing the piano in this particular space. The denomination that I was a part of for a long time, I would say simply from birth, was the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. Mm-hmm. I still call myself a Disciples of Christ from the standpoint of being a member of the denomination, but I haven't taken part for a while, in part because the work that I do does not provide me a certain amount of stability to attend worship. But I still have plenty of friends, people who I grew up in the church, who I still maintain to this very day. And because, of course, we've all gotten older and hopefully wiser, we find ways to connect that not necessarily means we have to meet in church to make that happen. And because of the work that I do, and I do travel a lot, my work does not just mean I drive hundreds of miles at a shot. I've done that. I've driven as far south as Orlando, Florida, as far north as 4 hours north of Montreal, Canada, and as far west as Chicago, Illinois, all to drive a bus. Because where the people need the bus to be taking you someplace, someone has to do it. So this is the great example I use, and this is to your point, Todd. Mm-hmm. My mother was a registered nurse. My mother was specifically a scrub nurse. You know what that is. And it's because she was a scrub nurse, she served the surgeons. Now, when someone has to have their eye replaced, or their neck or their throat fixed, or their ears fixed, she worked in a hospital where eyes, ears, nose, and throat were the specialty. And because she was a scrub nurse, she needed to be available to work whenever they needed her. And because she was evidently good at what she did, she worked the same hospital for 27 years until she retired. She was called upon a lot. It's the same woman who also insisted I go to church. Now, I'm also clarify, my father was an atheist. So being married to a Holy Ghost Christian in that respect would be somewhat of a balancing act, but it really wasn't. Because ultimately, my father respected my mother's beliefs. It did not matter what she believed. Maybe he didn't always appreciate the method she went about it sometimes, because she could be a bit intense.
Yeah.
I haven't met a Spanish mother yet in my life who wasn't intense, especially when religion came into the picture. So go figure that. And that's not a disrespect. It's just a fact, okay?
Yeah.
But it's also a fact that also helped me to grow up in New York City in the 70s and not get shot or stabbed. Because when your parents are your parents, they're not trying to be friends with you. They're trying to instill the fear of God in you.
Amen.
So that way you understand how to walk through life and not get yourself smacked around. And I listened to my folks because I was afraid of them. And that's a good thing.
Fear of your parents is a good thing.
I have no problem with that. So
Good healthy dose of fear.
So there would be times my mother would have
Watch
to
out,
go
Calvin.
to work on a Sunday. But she had instilled this relationship of the church and the people there with me. So when she couldn't go, I would find myself going because I had camaraderie. I also had something to do, namely playing the piano, because eventually I evolved to playing the music in church on a regular basis. That's how I was able to cut my teeth, cut my bones. So she couldn't go because she had to work. Okay, I went. For the longest time, though, I had a hard time being able to embrace that notion. We're supposed to be going to church, but you have to work. Well, how do you go to work and not go to church? That doesn't make any sense to me. Then I became a bus driver. Something that I had always wanted to do from a long time ago. I'm thinking from age 3 I wanted to drive a bus. My mother would always claim he's going to be a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant. You know, the safe jobs. No disrespect, but just jobs that you could aspire to with minimal effort.
Sure.
And I would agree, in part because she's my mother and I was going to make her happy. I would agree, yeah, I'm going to be a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant. You can tell by the way I'm saying that I had much enthusiasm in saying that. But I was always end every sentence with this, and I'm going to drive a bus. That's never changed. Now I'm 23 years driving a bus, so I think I fulfilled that component of it. But she would have to go work, and if she had to work, she had to work because someone's eye, ear, nose, or throat was being operated on, and she was providing the tools for the surgeons to do her job.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't go operate on this person who could lose an eye, ear, nose, or throat, or possibly die because I have to go sit in the pew and be told how to support my life in a godly way. I think she was basically demonstrating what happens when you get it right. And it's time to now manifest that in your life to the larger world out there. If you're not contributing to the human condition, you're creating problems, as far as I'm concerned. So to be a driver of a bus in a city like New York, where most folks rely on public transit to get to where they're going to, regardless of the time of the day or the day of the week, explain me this. How are you going to get to church if you don't own a car? How are you going to get to your synagogue or to your mosque if you don't have your own personal means of transportation? Well, that's what this thing that comes down the street that's about 40 feet long, about 9 feet high, that can transverse the streets. Well, someone's got to drive that bus. Well, as we like to say in Puerto Rico, presente. And that's the truth. So I bring that component to my work. It's not just me steering the wheel and getting the vehicle down the streets. It's about the lady who's traveling with her child to church. They live in the Bronx, the church is in Manhattan. They can't necessarily walk there. And if they could, maybe they would rather not, so they can use the time they need to get to where they're going to prepare themselves. Because worship is about preparation. You just can't just go in and all of a sudden go into worship mode. You guys are the epitome of that. Because you just can't wake up one morning and say, okay, I'm going to be chaplain. We're going to play chaplain today. No, you still got to have your coffee, get your mind right for it. If you don't do these things to get your mind right, then you're going to be lousy in your job.
That's right.
Now, that being said, let me explain to you how it became for me, Sal and me, our reconnection. I've known this kid since he's 17 years old. I met Sal
long time.
long time ago, back at a decade called the 80s. I know, the 80s. Wow, bad hair. Anyway, well, at least hair for me. I don't have any more.
Yeah, Bill had hair when we met.
I had a lot of hair back then. Well, I had enough to know that I was older, but I was starting to look like I'm looking too old for my age. It's not right. Bottom line was, as Sal has mentioned, he's part of the Presbyterian Church. Back then, there was this conference that was done, and I'm not sure if it's still done.
No.
But back then, there was a conference done called the Presbyterian Youth Council. And
Silver Bay Presbyterian Youth Conference. And
it took place at a camp, a YMCA camp, upstate New York in the Adirondacks called Silver Bay.
On Lake George.
And a mutual friend of ours, I'm going to give a shout out to her because she's the reason why we met. Her name is the Reverend Dr. Margaret Amer Auger. She's living out of Austin. She's a professor of New Testament studies. And when I first met her, she was pursuing her MDiv at the Union Theological Seminary. And while she was pursuing that, and also serving a Presbyterian church in White Plains, New York, she brought to my attention the Youth Council, how they were going to meet up for a full week in June, and would I be interested in providing musical support to the conference? And I said, sure, why not? So I go, and as we take part, it turned out that I would be put to more duties other than just playing the piano, which in and of itself was a difficult task because I had to prepare all this music. But, you come prepared for the job, then anything else comes down the line.
Sure.
So that being said, I was tasked to take part as a youth leader in youth groups that would meet up, discuss Bible, discuss topics that were important to them as they were discovering themselves. And I was charged to lead a group, and each group was given their own name to choose from. Now, in 1998, when I first met Sal, there was a musical that came out. It wasn't a musical. It was a play that came out in the city by John Leguizamo. It was his one-man show, and it was called Freak. And it loosely is about his life growing up in Jackson Heights, Queens, around the same time. He and I are the same age. And we share birthdays about a month apart from each other. But by the time he was doing that play, he was already a monster. He was already a heavy player in the game. So he had the one-man show. He had these hats. They all said Freak. I brought my hat with me to the conference. And when it came time to name my group, I named my group The Freaks. And Sal and quite a number of people that he and I both know to this day, when I refer to them online, live, whatever, I refer to them, how you doing, you freak? And that's to this day. Now, why is that important?
One of my nicknames was?
What was your nickname?
It wasn't a nickname that was that I necessarily liked being called, but it became who I am. Freak.
Yeah, freak.
Well, there you go. Karma is a wonderful thing, isn't it?
The spirit moves in wonderful ways.
Fast forward to about 7 years ago, 2013. My mother served as a nurse until 1990, then she retired. Unfortunately, Alzheimer's got her and got her bad. And the year she died was 2013. We reconnected first through Facebook. Sal and I reconnected through Facebook. Facebook, in that respect, I thank God for that because without it, I don't think I would have made the kind of connections or reconnections that I have done in my life. My parents would have benefited from this if this had come out during their time when they were the most vibrant. It came out for us, so I'm grateful for that. To that end, as my mother was, slipping away, we had to take her to New York Presbyterian Hospital because she had broken her hip. And when she was placed there, it was discovered by the staff that she was a nurse, so they kind of gave her special treatment.
Sure.
And they put her in her own private room with music playing. And I spent time in there, of course, let her know that I was there. Whether she recognized that I was there or not was really not the point. It was that I was there. And to be specific, what took place was I put a posting on Facebook that said that I'm at New York Presbyterian Hospital, I'm with my mother, and I'm sad. What I didn't realize that Sal had texted me on Facebook Messenger that he was in the hospital at the time. You were clergy.
Working that floor.
I was working that floor as a chaplain.
that day. That slipped by me. So I'm in the room with my mother, just being in the space, and all of a sudden I get a knock on the door, and this guy walks in, and you walked in, and you're in the way you walk in, Sal, just being ready to be clergy. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know it was him at first. But when he walked in, I looked up and I said, I know you. And it hit me like a shot because I recognized it was Sal. I was like, what the hell are you doing here? And then it all got all put together.
Look at you, freak.
Chaplain freak.
Exactly. But it was like the universe saying, we got you. We got you. You ministered to Sal, he gets to minister to you.
God works that way, man.
And I'm like, you know what? Bet that, because I needed it in the worst possible way. But this is what also happened. And he wasn't ready. He wasn't expecting this. Because even though I was in a lot of pain at the time, my mother was getting ready to die. There's no question about it. I'm a realist. I'm not going to deny it, but still it hurts because my father had already passed 5 years previously. So at this point, my other living parent is about to leave the planet. And how am I going to deal with this? Well, I better find ways. But I still found it in me to be able to provide a teachable moment, for lack of a better word. I told Sal, when she goes, you're doing the eulogy. Mm-hmm. Had you done eulogies up to that point?
That was my first eulogy.
Right. And I said, I don't care if it's your first eulogy. When she goes, you're doing the eulogy. Period. End of story. I don't want to hear no ifs, ands, buts, or I don't think I have the experience. Crap, I ain't hearing that. She passed away on November 9th of that year. I like to call it the reverse 9/11. And when it happened, I reached out to Sal and asked him, it's happened, can you do it? I didn't ask a question. It was more like, Sal, she passed, get ready to do this. And he did. And I'm going to be perfectly frank with you. I was watching you do the eulogy and realized that most every word you said from that eulogy came from the notes that came from the program that I had to print it out. And I had to go, dude, what's up? And I realized, no, that's not fair. No, it's not fair. It's not fair because you didn't know my mother long enough to really make a true, honest assessment.
That's what we call clergy trick, by the way.
That is a clergy trick.
You could not have known to make that kind of true assessment but for the fact that you had some, what's the word they use, cliff notes? On my mother, so that was fine. Now that being said, when Margaret did my father's eulogy, she was ready. She was ready. She wrote a whole sermon about "You Bet Your Life" because apparently that was my father's favorite saying. Because there was a TV show back in the 50s and 60s called "You Bet Your Life" that Groucho Marx used to host, and people used to confuse Groucho Marx with my father because my father had these bushy eyebrows, smoked a cigar, was pretty much the same complexion as Groucho Marx. So people of a certain age made that leap, and I went, yeah, okay, fine, whatever works for you. But Margaret made that leap on her own just by the books she used to see my father read, because my father was a voracious reader. He didn't care what he read. If it was unpopular, he didn't care. He wanted to know what he wanted to know. If he didn't like it, too bad, you're not walking in his shoes, deal with it. That was my father. My mother was of the opinion and of the strength and belief that she knew she wanted to serve God in the Christian tradition. She also knew that her responsibility to the outside world also played a part in that the vocation she chose.
Absolutely.
Or maybe to the point the vocation that chose her.
Yes.
Requires certain sacrifice.
You know, that's exactly the way my wife was not she grew up Roman Catholic, but she was not a practicing Roman Catholic. But she was the one that helped me realize I needed to answer the call I had when I was a child. And she's the one that has embraced this life of ministry and actually understands that her role as a nurse is the role of a minister. She's ministering differently than I would sitting bedside with somebody, but she's ministering all the same because our body, our soul, our minds, they're not disconnected. They're all a part of a greater whole. And she recognizes that, and she absolutely does minister. And let me tell you, when I passed out a few months ago, I don't know if I told this on... Did I tell this live? I think I did. When I passed out and broke my teeth... Oh, yeah, I did. When I passed out and broke my teeth... I have to say, I was really thankful that night I was married to a nurse. She ministered to me. But, yeah, so... Yeah, absolutely. That is a ministry.
I say I agree not only with... Yeah, absolutely. It's a good thing your wife was there at the time, right? I also get, for me now, that because of what my mother had to do, it did bother her.
Yeah.
On those times she had to work
and couldn't be at church.
And couldn't be at church.
Absolutely.
Yes.
But I think she knew in a way that she could not necessarily verbalize to me back then when I was a child, but she could demonstrate.
Yeah.
Right.
That I may not be able to be at church, but I'm serving church. And here's my point. The fact remains that she, as your wife, as a nurse, may be ministering in that way to people who are sick. There is one thing that she is capable of doing, as my mother was, that you as a minister, as a clergyman, would not have been able to do.
Right.
If something would happen to the patient right then and there that required medical attention, she had the tools to do it.
Absolutely, and that's just as vital.
Right.
You know, in fact, in that moment, that's more vital.
Right. Because
My
she will
praying for
say, because if I'm, trust me, but I'll tell you, and tell me if this is accurate. If, let's say you're with a patient and that person goes into cardiac arrest, and your wife was there working as a nurse, she'd throw your ass out the room.
Oh yeah,
Get out the room.
We
gotta do saving people's lives now.
That's
now
how the nurses take that authority.
Yep. Exactly. And at that point, are you going to argue with your wife? Oh, I don't think so.
Nope. In fact, I would throw my own ass out the room.
Hello. When I was a kid, my mother. When I was a kid, I found out that I was allergic to shrimp, shellfish in general. And when I was 14 years old, I had like a shrimp cocktail meal, like one of those TV dinners, and drank orange juice. The combination swelled my throat up. Mm-hmm. Now, I didn't realize that I was having a problem, but I did feel very uncomfortable. My mother, being my mother and being a nurse, recognized the problem and told me, let's go. Now, we used to live near where she worked. We walked to the hospital where she worked. In fact, the reason we moved to Manhattan because they wanted her to be closer to her job.
Sure.
So they got us into a place called Stuyvesant Town back in the 1970s when the waiting list was 20 years long. They pushed us to the front of the line because they wanted her to be walking distance to the hospital, not 2 subways on a long walk distance to the hospital. Sure. Right. So we ended up going there, and they pumped me full of their antibiotics and essentially saved my life. They told her later, had he tried to sleep through the night, he would have suffocated in his sleep.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, okay, I will yield to you, my mom, when it comes to all things medical. Period, end of story. Yeah. So I totally get that. So, yeah, to bring to a conclusion, our reconnection was as a direct result of mine having to prepare my mother for life after.
It's just amazing how the spirit works.
For life after.
Like that.
And if I had to do it over again, I'd do a better sermon for you.
I think at this point you have a couple more years in the game that might provide, and a couple more titles going along with it. That's another thing about you cats that I'm really digging. Both of y'all got the kind of, I can't do ink personally because I'm also an actor, and actors, they get kind of, casting directors get kind of weird when you show up wearing tats, because then if a part is right for you, but you wear ink in a place where it's going to be on camera, that might turn off people who are the ones paying the checks. Yes. Unless they want you to be loaded with tats, like on a show like Sons of Anarchy, where you
sure.
couldn't show up with enough tats to satisfy them cats, and that was
You wouldn't
cool.
get the job if you didn't have tats.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm of a certain age where it doesn't apply to me really, so I don't necessarily need it. But the fact that I can hang out with two clergymen who sport tats and can know how and have game on it,
Tats.
that's hot. That's hot. to me.
Piercings, you know.
Well, for me, that was back in the 90s. That was when I went through that phase. You know, whatever.
We have to do one where I got like a dangly, like George Michael earring.
But
Go ahead, Sal.
yeah, so it's important, I think, to wrap it up a little bit. It's important to recognize that one, we get cranky when we don't get to worship. My wife understands when I don't get to go to worship, I get cranky because I need that time with God and with her. But also, she knows that God has called me to a service industry.
I'll make this last point because this will also tie into what you just said. How do I find ways to worship, though, or to be in a spiritual space when I can't step into a church?
Yep.
That's where the music comes in. Because I was raised in a church, hymns to this day are not too far away from me. So I will find myself dwelling on a hymn that I used to love to play on the piano and lose my mind over it. I may not be able to embrace the lyrics today based on how we as a society, as a culture are evolving and how we address each other. Because today, now it's not about ladies and gentlemen, it's more like he, him, his, her, she, hers. Or if you can't identify yet because you don't know where you stand, that's on you, and I respect that. Sure. But because I am of a certain age, I tend to go to what I know. Mm-hmm. So lyrics that I remember singing in church to the top of my lungs growing up, I may not be able to embrace, but the music never dies.
Never dies.
I can listen to a song like It Is Well With My Soul.
Oh, I love that.
That's a great
I can't speak to the verse, but I can speak to the chorus. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. And every time I think of that song, I get reminded of my parents again.
Yeah.
And by the way, in both my parents' cases, I played the music for their funerals and ended each time playing that song. And it always moves me, like it's moving me now. And it's a beautiful song to play on the piano.
Yep.
So so whenever I need to have worship, like this is for me worship, thinking about my parents and thinking about how the music that I used to say goodbye to them was part of my upbringing, and how I can play it to this very day without any questions. So when I'm on a job and I can't be at a place where there's church, I'll just make church happen. I'll put on a CD and I'll go onto my iPad, my iPhone, and I'll start pumping Kirk Franklin.
Oh, I love Kirk Franklin.
Or Hezekiah Walker.
Yeah.
Or Mary Mary. I'm not even touching the majority of the music that I grew up with. But those are examples of gospel music and gospel artists that I grew up listening to. Oh, even better, Lauryn Hill and her rendition of His Eyes on the Sparrow.
Yeah.
And the very first time I heard that, I was on a charter on a Sunday, right across the street from what's that club on 125th Street? Oh my God, I just had my reunion there. How can I forget it? It'll come to me. The Cotton Club.
The Cotton Club, yeah.
The Cotton Club. And I was parked across the street and decided, let me go play Lauryn Hill and her rendition of His Eyes on the Sparrow. And by the time the transition in notes went half step up, I started crying because it's like, oh my God, I'm feeling this. Now, the words may or may not have been as important, but the music was everything to me. So I can go out on charter, be on charter for a week at a time, not have a chance to be near a church space or any kind of a worship space. All I gotta do is just pop on the music and I'm good to go. And with my father, for example, when he passed, I was in a cab being driven back to Jamaica Station, and the driver saw my condition and asked what was going on with me, and I told him my father just died and all that. And without hesitation, he popped on this song. I don't remember the exact name, but I could find it. And it just started hitting me, all these waves of despair, yes, because my father had just died at that time, coupled with this belief that, yeah, my father may have not believed in God, but I had a feeling he was a lot more deeper than that, and therefore connecting that connection musically through the music that I was listening to provided a further means of connecting with my father and now with my mother long after they've passed. So for me, all I gotta do is pop on a song, and if the music is hitting me a certain way, I'm having church.
So that's church for you. Sal, what's church for you when you can't have church?
And to close the loop, Bill did end up performing at my ordination.
Ordination? Oh my God.
Coming back from driving a bus for a TV show.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Real quick. It happened Valentine's week, because
Yes, I
your
remember.
ordination was on a Sunday.
It's my wife's birthday. It's Valentine's Day. I remember that.
I got called by the company I drove for last to bring a bus for a show and tell for a TV show that eventually became a monster of Netflix. Can I say the title?
Orange is the New Black.
Orange is the New Black.
Oh.
I drive the bus to Queens. They shoot their scenes in Queens. A week later, I get a call from my dispatcher screaming for me, "Bill, you're going to Chicago at 9:23. You're going to Chicago at 9:23. I'm like, who is this? But he explained to me that they wanted that bus in Chicago. And I said, you do know that Chicago has buses in excess. They might have what they're looking for. No. They had to maintain the C word. In this particular case, it's continuity. They were filming the episode backwards. I get that. So the bus had to be driven to Chicago. Now, I get told I'm doing that. This fool calls me up talking about, hey, I'm getting ordained on Sunday, February. I forgot the date. I'm like, oh, snap. That's right after I'm getting back from Chicago. Ooh. But then I said, you know what, Sal? I'll be there. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to be there. Because too many things can happen that could prevent me from getting back in time for his ordination. But I said, hell or high water, I'm going to get there. I drive on a Monday. I get to Chicago by Wednesday. I take a day off in Chicago. Friday, we shoot the scenes. Saturday morning, I drive back. It's an 11-hour journey. By federal, I am not allowed to drive more than 10 hours at a time. Then I have to pull over for 8 and then start all over again. So on that Saturday, I drove that bus as far as I could east through Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, to maybe 2 hours out of the New Jersey border in Pennsylvania before I had to stop. Got my 8 hours. The second 8 hours happened. 8 hours and 1 minute later, I was back on the road driving back to Jersey. The next day, I drove to his church and we did this thing.
That's awesome.
And it was totally fat. Seeing old friends again.
Yeah.
And seeing how he had grown was just amazing to me. Absolutely amazing to me. How Sal had evolved. And I had to see that. I had to see this culmination. But it turned out to be more than just a culmination, but more like a new beginning. And I wasn't missing that for anything.
Yeah. So it was awesome. That made the ordination. But to get back to what is worship for me is music. Music is part of it. You've noticed that most of my music selections are spiritual in nature, but also worship for me is getting away in nature with Allison. But also going to the dojo when I can, which hasn't been in a while, so I haven't really worshipped in a while, but
Yeah.
that has been historically, for me, worship.
So, for me, because, and I'll confess, this is confession hour, I have not been good at finding time to worship. So what I'm doing this year is the best I can do at the moment is I'm starting to include my lay speakers more in the schedule, not being on the pulpit every week of every month, and only allowing them to preach only having them preach when I'm on vacation. So what I'm doing is scheduling them, and so I sit with my family, I let them lead worship, and then also we give each other feedback and stuff on sermons. So it's a way of like really building up the laity, but also giving me a chance to get fed. And also, somebody said this to me, and it's true, just because I'm the pastor doesn't mean that other people don't have a word that God is putting on their hearts to speak, and a word that could be speaking to me and feeding me. So that's what I've been doing to worship. But I would also say music and art. Art for me, poetry, art, music, and I write my own music, and so those things, and being in nature. I mean, I'll often tell people, like, nature's not an excuse to not go to church. But for somebody who's in church all the time, nature is my excuse to be at church with God. A lot of people will say, well, I don't need to go to church. I can just go to a mountaintop and pray. And I'm like, that's true. But when a tree falls on you while you're alone on the mountaintop praying, then what?
Only God will hear you.
Yeah. So that to me is my way of saying that, church is about the community as well as worship. But I am a part of that, and so I need to find ways of connecting with God, because what I've noticed is when I am in church, leading church week after week after week after week after week, I'm getting fed in some ways, but I'm not getting fed in the ways that I need, particular to my soul and to my struggles, and that becomes a very hollow thing after a while, and it becomes almost like a wall between you and God. Everybody else is connecting through you, but you're not connecting. And then how can you best serve people when you're not connecting to the one that you're connecting others to? So it's a struggle. It is a struggle.
It's a struggle.
Yeah.
I've found recently creating things with my hands, building things out of wood.
Would a baby have anything to do with that?
Baby would have something to do with that. I built a changing table.
You're about to get out of practice, aren't you?
Oh, yeah. But also, getting away to the woods is great, but I also need to connect to the Eucharist as much as possible.
That's the thing, yeah. And you don't get to it.
I don't get that at the dojo or in the woods or in the garage.
No. And honestly, you can't have communion just by yourself. Yeah. Theologically speaking,
that's why they call it communion.
Communion,
You commune with people.
It's not me union. It's communion.
Right. When I find myself working on jobs that may involve the Sabbath, like tomorrow, for example, I'm supposed to be doing a job. So when I take these people to where they're going to, their attitude is, okay, bus is here, driver's here, looks competent, looks prepared, knows where they're going and back. Can this job happen the way the people who are paying their hard-earned money to make it happen? Mm-hmm. So I say, yeah, in that regard, I'm providing a form of ministry, because if they could do it themselves, they would.
Yeah.
Not that they can't, they chose not to because they know there's someone else who is better suited, better prepared, and is of the mindset to effectively provide the service needed. Therein, someone like me brings them their vehicle, takes them to where they have to go to. It provides a certain captive audience for me. It's like having a congregation of up to 55 people.
Yes. A captive audience.
A captive audience, if you will.
Yep.
Which also provides another important, and I don't dismiss it as very serious component of my job. We all drive. We all know there are a lot of people out there that don't take their driving seriously enough to where they're focusing on the road.
Yeah.
And it's because I am aware of that as a professional. I have to take into account the quirks of other people's misbehaviors. But the 55 people behind me don't care about that. They're putting that task to me.
Yep.
So if that's the case, then my ministry is getting them there from one point to another and back safely as quickly as possible without incident, accident, or injury. And that's part of my driver's creed.
So, what Bill is saying is if you're passing a bus or a big tractor trailer, especially bus though, don't cut them off.
Yeah.
Don't cut them off and brake check them.
No.
Give them space.
Amen. Rules of the road.
Rules of the road.
Hey, what's that? That's. I think that's saying don't be a jerk.
Don't be a jerk.
Yeah, something like
I'm
that.
going to call it, can I just be perfectly frank?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, that's for the end of the podcast. I totally get that. Bottom line is, thank you for that, Sal. Thank you for that public service announcement.
Yes, that is a beautiful public
And
service.
yes, it does apply to tractor trailers as well because they're bigger than buses.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be you don't want to be behind a tractor trailer brake checking them, and then they can't stop for whatever the reason, or
Well,
maybe because they're just too heavy. I don't know.
I can tell you that you don't want to be behind a tractor trailer who lost its brakes either. I experienced that personally. It hit a Jeep Patriot, hit a Jeep Cherokee, hit us. And let me tell you, I have never felt force like that before and never want to again. I tore my meniscus in that.
Yep.
And it was interesting.
So,
Full
I think
circle.
what we're getting to here is whether you're clergy or not, you need to take time for yourself.
Yes, and Sabbath's about resting.
Get some rest.
Yeah.
But then also find communion. Find a group of people to do it with.
Yes, yes. Even if it's in a cigar shop,
Even if it's in the cigar shop.
puffing your life and your worries away.
So I think we're going to wrap up with that.
Sounds good.
You can catch us on all of our our social media.
Yeah, and by the way, you patrons, you're about to hop over to the exclusive side of this. So
Get some video of our
get some
discussion.
video, get a flavor of the chemistry between Sal and Bill and myself. But this has been a great time, man. This has been a great time.
And keep an eye out. I think Bill also has, he's working on a script and a play that should be, you want to plug that real quick?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, plug it.
I've been writing the script for quite a number of years. Essentially, it's telling the stories of a long-distance driver. Right now, its working title is called From Where I Sit, because I sit behind the steering wheel of a bus, and I have a perspective which is not seen by most people. And also, from the standpoint as a driver, I have to be true to the people who also do what I do. And not everybody is able to articulate their intentions. It's getting easier now on Facebook to do that because I have a lot of people who I know on Facebook who are drivers. But I have been fortunate enough to combine my skills as a writer combined with my skills as a musician and as an actor to write a script that I want to eventually put out on stage that will tell stories from the road. From the point of a long-distance driver. # road jockey.
Road jockey. Amen. Amen.
So,
Well,
be on the lookout.
yeah, so with that said, guys, I'm going to say, Bill, this was a superb, most excellent Maduro cigar. Thank you.
You're
Thank
quite
you.
welcome. I'm
And
digging this very much myself.
amen. And in the meantime, friends, remember, be excellent to each other.
And don't be a jerk.
Rock on.
Rock on.